Welcome to ISKCON of Silicon Valley, and Happy Mother's Day for all mothers and future mothers. Hare Krishna. As Prabhupada points out in the Bhagavad Gita, that when you consider the love of a mother, it's the purest kind of love in this world. Mother gives 100% of her energy to the child and is naturally compelled to take care and nurture the child. And then Prabhupada says, if you want to understand Krishna, you can take the love of a mother and times it in the millions, and you can understand the way Krishna has affection for all living beings. Sometimes there's a sense, because of my losing context in the world, that the world's an unfair place or I'm not being nurtured. Of course, Prabhupada gives the example that if you run away from home, from your mother and father who are loving you, and then somehow or other you become taken in by bad foster parents, you may feel a little uncomfortable, to say the least. Durga, who's actually, is the gain too high? You're that right. Whatever I had for lunch is giving me superpowers to project. Durga is an expansion ultimately of Srimati Radharani. It's the most nurturing of all. She's the essence of all nurturing. And Durga, of course, has her job. She has a trident, which represents the threefold miseries. And her service is to remind us that this isn't our home. And we can take it as sort of drawing competition. Take it as some sort of an affront. But we can remember everything in context. That's part of Krishna consciousness, sambandha gyan, remembering why we're in the situations we're in, and also remembering our original situation. So first, I'm offering my obeisances, respects to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who's wearing a particularly beautiful garland today. Perhaps maybe it's the best garland I've ever seen. What do you think? I mean, it's amazing, the two colors and then the spiral at the top. Srila Prabhupada had received an instruction from his guru. He had grown up in a very pious family of pure devotees. His father was a pure devotee of Krishna, which means that he worshipped Krishna with no expectation of return. He didn't worship anyone else. And he raised his son, Abai, Charanara, Binda. Actually, he was just called Abai when he was a child, to also worship in the same way. And one of the ways that he had tried to give his son as much mercy as possible was by inviting sadhus to the house. And anybody who's from India knows that there are varieties of sadhus. For some it's a livelihood, and others may be exalted and highly learned and so forth. Prabhupada had seen his fair share of ones that were doing it for livelihood. But his father didn't discriminate so much. He just wanted everyone to bless his child. So later, when he was busy in his education, and one of his friends, one of Abai's friends, invited him to come see a sadhu, he was hesitant. But on his friend's insistence, this one was different. He came and met his future spiritual master. That happened in Calcutta. The place is still there. In fact, the building where he met his Guru Maharaj was reconstructed. And it's a very beautiful place, in Ultadanga Junction Road. The original house where his guru and some sannyasis and brahmacharis lived, the ashrama, is now reconstituted. So I highly recommend a visit there. It won an award for remodeling. And that's not the word remodeling, but I couldn't think of the correct word. It's not called a remodel. Restoration. Who said that? Thank you. Restoration. So after meeting his guru, actually, he was inspired to take up spiritual life. And a verse I was reading today in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching one of his prominent disciples, whose name was Sanatan. Everyone please say Sanatan. And he was a Goswami, so it was Sanatan Goswami. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave exclusive time to him to teach him the principles of Krishna consciousness. And he told Sanatan, did Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that when one comes in contact with a real sadhu, then one's life will naturally evolve. And that can happen very quickly. So Prabhupada described how his guru had given him an instruction as soon as he met him that he should take up the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to spread the Sankirtan movement, especially in English, because he could understand that he was an educated young man and he spoke English well. And he said at that time the instruction that his guru had given him went straight to his heart, and he kept it there. And later did what he did, including starting 108 spiritual communities and temples around the world and printing 70 volumes of books. Speak of writing thousands and thousands of letters. Something I'm reading right now is all of Prabhupada's letters. And it's extremely encouraging. In each one, he takes time, sometimes 2 pages, to answer somebody's question, and he includes encouragement. Oftentimes he leaves a note below, or a PS. And oftentimes it's a last bit of encouragement. So the person leaves the letter with a sense of being encouraged. So I felt encouraged reading those letters. And he was one person, but he traveled all over the world at least 14 times and established the Krishna consciousness movement. So we owe a debt of gratitude to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who started this movement, and who especially came for those in the Western countries. And he also had a theory, because at the time when he started teaching Krishna consciousness and starting with the idea to forming a worldwide movement, people in India were looking in a different way. They were looking towards the West, thinking, how can we become more sophisticated, and how can we become more industrialized and technologically minded and so forth. That's during a big push for technology, which seems to have worked out okay, huh? Otherwise, every store you go to in Silicon Valley, if you're waiting for Westerners to come out, you're going to wait a long time. So he had this mission to perform here in the West. And amazingly, because he only had a limited amount of time and his health wasn't great, but he was still able to establish a worldwide mission of Krishna consciousness. So he's the founder, Acharya. He founded the movement, and he's the Acharya, meaning the prime teacher for the movement. And there are many books that he left behind with the idea that the teachings in the books and also the system he set up for practicing Krishna consciousness could be passed along. And people could follow that in perpetuity and be able to elevate themselves in Krishna consciousness. So that's what we have here. This is a franchise of the original Krishna conscious movement. It's part of the ISKCON society, and we follow the general structure of the whole movement right here in ISKCON Silicon Valley. So regarding the teachings that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was given, he says that, as I explained last night when we were at our Goshala, which is just a little ways down the road, that there's a phenomena in this world that we get involved with called bhoga and tyāga. Does anybody remember hearing that was there at the Goshala? Bhoga is something, Sanskrit word that means one tries to use things for one's own enjoyment. And a remarkable statement in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna gives warns us about the results of that. He says, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonai evate adyantavanta konteya nateshu ramate buddha. That an intelligent person, this is called Buddha, somebody's intelligent, ramate, doesn't take joy in endeavoring for satisfaction of the senses by taking material objects, surrounding oneself with the kind of things that most people think will make them happy. He said because that kind of experience, and again, as I said last night, it doesn't mean that one shouldn't take what one needs in order to live a natural, healthy life. However, if one's intention is to enjoy material things, Krishna gives this formula, which is that as soon as you try to enjoy a material thing, then it will become the cause of your distress. That's good to know, right? Helpful information? Yeah. So, yehi samsparshaja, samsparsha ja, bhoga, dukkha, there's the word, bhoga. When you try to enjoy material things, then inherent in it, and the way he puts it metaphorically, is yoni, that's, he said, it's like something's going to be born from that experience. From the womb of that experience comes dukkha, or misalignment and unhappiness. You won't be satisfied. So he said, wise people know this, and therefore they don't get excited about bhoga, or trying to enjoy independently of Krishna, just endeavoring for material enjoyment. It doesn't give them satisfaction, and therefore they don't go for it. Now the other side of the coin I talked about last night is called tyāga. Tyāga means renunciation. So one could have what we say in a cliche, a knee-jerk reaction to the misery that comes from bhoga. And we might then say, then what I'll do, I'll beat the system and I'll quit the material world altogether. And I'll try not to touch it at all. That's the implication of the other side of the pendulum swing from bhoga to tyāga, which means I'll just give up everything. Of course, sometimes we have reactions to any circumstance that doesn't work out. Have you ever had a reaction to something that didn't work out to you and said, well, then just forget the whole thing? Only 3 or 4 people, huh? There's a way of ultimatums we might make even in relationships where something isn't going our way and then just forget it then. Have you ever heard that? Forget it, is it forget it, comma, then? Forget it then. Just forget the whole thing. How does that work out for you if you ever tried using that? Not great. And similarly, the reaction to the material world, which is forget it then, forget the whole thing. Krishna says that, or Lord Chaitanya is specifically saying that doesn't work out either. You can't just forget it. It's there. It's part of your existence. You're in the middle of it. So what to do? This is the really interesting part, and we didn't get it to last night fully. In fact, I didn't use the terminology. And that is called bhakti rasa. Would you like to say it? It's a nice phrase. Bhakti rasa. So Lord Chaitanya taught, here are the 2 extremes that everybody goes to in the material world, minus information about how to connect to Krishna. which is called bhakti yoga, and the process that Lord Chaitanya taught and the process that Srila Prabhupada brought for the world to engage in, and it's called bhakti rasa. Rasa means the juice. What we get out of anything is called the rasa. Get out of means that what are we really looking for when we do something in this world? For instance, when you work hard at a company. Anybody work hard at a company? What do you really want? I mean, what's the enjoyment that you get out of that ultimately? Can you suggest? Money? And what does money do for you? What do you get out of that? Happiness? Like what kind of happiness? What leads to the happiness of having money? And by the way, does it really buy? Yeah, the car thing. There's not a lot of stuff you can get. One suggestion is also you're able to maybe maintain your family. And do you feel good about that if you can maintain the family and see that they're getting sufficient number of japatis or idli? Be culturally diverse here. Udapam. So we might feel a sense of satisfaction. I'm providing for myself, for my family, and you might get a little sense of freedom. You have some money, you can fly here or there, or you can buy a new car whenever you want, something like that. This is the rasa that you get. And so there's a way that we're not really working for the money, ultimately, but we're working for what the money might bring us. And that's a sense of freedom and a sense of being happily engaged in a relationship with others that you're taken care of, because somebody has money, maybe they raise a family, and then in the family, the parents. Why do parents take the trouble to raise children? Come on, you better have a quick answer for that. Kids, cover your ears. All right, go ahead. That they might take care of you in old age. Well, that's a little bit tit for tat. Children can be cute, right? And there's also a sense of pride in raising a straight A student or something. Or whatever it may be. I've seen parents when they're watching their child play cricket. I've not actually seen that. I'm making stuff up. But and the child gets a sixer, and then the father's little tear. There's a little rasa that that was my boy. He had a sixer, and see, I know about cricket. So. There's something we're trying to get to. It's like if somebody goes to buy a drill at a store, it's not really the drill that makes them happy. It's the sense of being able to do something with it, like drill a hole in the wall and then put up a picture of their family or something like that. It's the end result they're looking for. There's some rasa that we're looking for in everything. And when we eat, we're looking for some taste. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, there are many tastes we can have in this world. The taste we get from bhoga and even tyāga is, he called chapala sukha. Chapala means that which it won't last. And that's exactly what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita is wrong with bhoga. He says it comes and goes. We want it to stay, but then there's an end to it. He says specifically, adyanta vanta. That means it has a beginning and an end. And so even as we're taking the happiness, we're aware of the fact that it's going to end. And that kind of ruins the experience a little bit. There's a sense within us that this is going to be over at some time. And even those who have great relationships, like my parents had a great relationship. They were married 70 years. And I remember when it was over because one of them passed away. And then that was the end of that relationship. And I remember at the memorial, they were on a picture, said, we had a good run. And I was thinking, yeah, but it could have kept going. And that's the idea behind bhakti rasa. We have this propensity to enjoy. We want rasa. And we also want relationship. We all have a propensity to love. But when we invest it in relationships in this world, and that's not to say we shouldn't. We have relationships where we have to give our love, and not have to, we naturally do. That's what we do. But we can also know that the ultimate goal of relationships is to remember the source of all relationships, and what our real relationship is with Krishna. And that's called bhakti rasa. Anything that we do for Krishna in this lifetime, using our mind, senses, intelligence, and it's for Krishna, we're doing it for Krishna, that brings us bhakti rasa, or the taste of relationship with Krishna. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught that when you have bhakti rasa, when you have a taste for this, that you like to serve Krishna, you don't even have to work for liberation. Sometimes people who are considered spiritualists, and they are spiritualists because they realize the difference between matter and spirit. That's somebody who's attained siddhi or perfection in this life. That's the beginning stage, that you realize, I'm not my body. But where do you go from there? Well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you go from there into a relationship with Krishna, and when you're able to experience bhakti rasa, or the happiness of the relationship that you would have with Krishna, then you will lose interest in other things. And in that regard, in talking about bhakti rasa, Srila Prabhupada and Acharyas quote a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is an interesting verse because it uses a metaphor that I think we can all relate to. And the verse goes like this: Bhakti parishanu bhavo viraktir anyata traisha trika eka kala prapadya manasya yatasnata tushti pushti shura payonugasam. This is a metaphor, wait for it, about eating food. Yay! Finally, an analogy we can relate to. So this is about how when you eat food, you feel nourished. You feel satisfied, and you also feel like you're getting full. Tushti means nourished. Tushti means satisfied. Pushti means nourished. And shud apayanu means with every bite, you're realizing more and more how you're feeling full. And not just full, but you feel like you don't need to eat more. Or at least when you get to that point. You know that point when you're eating and then you realize for yourself, so somebody says you want more and you say, no, I don't want any more. But you were hungry a minute ago, but now you're not. So that's a phenomenon. And when you take to bhakti rasa, then there's three things that you get. The first one is bhakti itself, which is an experience of one's relationship with Krishna. And anubhava means you start to see Krishna for yourself within everything. What to speak of directly. You become aware of Krishna's manifestations, like he's with us in our hearts. One may become aware, as Prabhupada writes in the second canto of the Bhagavatam. It's an amazing verse. If you're writing anything down, I recommend you write this down and study this purport. It's at 2:235, and it's a meditation, a guided meditation of all things in Prabhupada's purport about how to see you're not your body. And within that meditation, he brings us to the point of being able to see this what he calls the super self, or the Paramatma within our hearts. These are the beginning stages. And then he says, the Bhagavatam says in the verse after, it's one of the Yogendras, for those who are keeping score at home, he says that you'll naturally be disinclined towards bhoga. That whole phenomena we talked about wanting to be satisfied by connecting our senses with the sense objects and thinking that will make us happy. When we have a sense of bhakti rasa, when we have a taste for it, then we're naturally disinclined from ordinary sense gratification. Now, how's that even possible? What's the way that that can be done? In the teachings of Rupa Goswami, he immediately gives this verse in the Nectar of Devotion, also known. It's derived from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, one of the most famous books on bhakti and bhakti rasa. And he says, Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tat pratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktir. Correct. And there's a way in which it's very practical that if you use your present senses, if anybody has present senses, raise your hand. Okay. If you use your senses in Krishna's service, then the result is the senses become purified. And when the senses become purified, then you can experience bhakti rasa. And this is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said is the perfection of life. You're freed from the obligation you have to the senses to try for sensual engagement called bhoga. You're freed from the natural default reaction to bhoga, which is, what's the mantra for that? Something comma. Forget it then. Didn't we say earlier? You just try to renounce something and then you say, forget it then? Yeah, just forget it then. You try to give up the material world because you get so frustrated. And then you end up on the other side, stranded in this place where, a desert, where you've restrained your senses from all, in a militant way, from all sense gratification. And Krishna talks about this in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam when he's teaching Uddhava about bhakti rasa. And he says, have you ever fasted for a long period of time in order to control the tongue? And then he said, well, what happens is, after you do that, then the tongue comes back later and says, you owe me, with interest. And so there's, again, a pendulum effect. If you militantly try to control the senses and restrain them from their objects, they'll come back the other way, because that's what they do. They're intimately related with their objects in the material world, and they don't like being restrained unless they have a higher taste and unless they're purified. So the process of bhakti is to use the senses in Krishna's service. And as you're doing that, the senses become purified, in touch with Krishna. For instance, if you use your ears to hear transcendental sound vibration, then it will purify the hearing process. That's a strange phrase, but it really means that the senses will be attracted to hearing a superior kind of vibration. They'll get there. In the beginning, it may even be abhorrent to hear Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. If anybody runs out, we'll know who it is. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. After all, Krishna himself says in the Bhagavad Gita, some people hear that and they run. They hear Hare Krishna and it's like, get us out of here. And they grab their kids and they go, don't listen to it. It sounds abrasive or scary or whatever it may be. They flee, Krishna says. Others, they're so tuned into the sound vibration that they want to hear it all the time because their senses become purified. And in the stage of experiencing bhakti rasa, everything that we're looking for becomes manifest in our life. We feel satisfied. That's everyone wants to be satisfied and happy. So Krishna also says that in the Bhagavad Gita, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasavarjam rasopyasya param drushva nivartate. When we do experience through our senses something that gives us this bhakti rasa, something that is a superior experience to what we've had before, he says that we naturally are disinclined to the other kinds of tastes because we recognize the difference between superior and inferior. And then one more and more enters into a way in which one lives one's life in service to Krishna. Now, what it doesn't mean that you have to give up your day job, because Krishna's not recommending anything impractical in the Bhagavad Gita. You don't have to change a lot of things except for the way that you think about how you're using everything and the way that you're offering it to Krishna. So, for instance, with eating, which is a big deal, isn't it? Don't we spend a lot of time getting ready for eating and then, cleaning up afterwards? So, this is one of the central points of human society anywhere. If you eat for Krishna, then you purify the eating process. See, I did it again. That's a weird phrase. You purify your tongue, the organ of taste, rather than eating for your own pleasure and eating foods that are materially tinged by the modes of nature. That also requires some context, but I'm just going to keep going. When you eat food that's affected by the modes of nature, when you eat it, then you also become affected by the modes of nature. Your consciousness becomes clouded. And your heart also develops a viciousness. Like if you eat foods that were produced by violence, you can have a sense of violence in your heart because of the food you ate. This is one of the sciences of eating. On the other hand, you might then say, well, I'll give up eating. Have you ever tried that? Yeah? How'd it work out? Not so good. However, there is the bhakti rasa path. There's a way that you can take ordinary vegetables and fruits and roots and tubers, whatever you wish, and offer it to Krishna. Then the eating process is connected to Krishna. It's bhakti yoga. You before you eat the food, you do it as a loving offer. You cook it and make a loving offering to Krishna. And then instead of just eating, you honor the remnants of what you offered. And then eating becomes a form of bhakti rasa. You can experience it for yourself when you eat food that's offered to Krishna. And your senses become purified. In your eyes, you can also see pictures of Krishna, or you can come to the temple and see the beauty of Krishna, or you can see the devotees and feel satisfied. And what about the ears? What about the ears? Give me a suggestion. Work with me, people. Go ahead. And hear some kirtan. Yeah, there's a difference between hearing transcendental sound vibration and mundane sound vibration. And in the Sri Upanishad, said people who have studied this carefully have come to this conclusion. Anyadevahur sambhavad, anyadahura sambhavat, iti shushumadhiranam yinas tavidchakshire. That smart people have figured this out. When you point your senses towards sense gratification, bhoga, then you get a completely different result from when you point your senses toward using them in Krishna's service. And so eating can be a service to Krishna. And working can be a service to Krishna. You offer some of the result of your work to Krishna and you think, I'm working for Krishna. Or any other sense activity. So this is the way that senses become purified. And as one lives a life aligned with Krishna, then one begins to experience what we what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said is bhakti rasa. To summarize, we have three choices, three categories. One is bhoga, the other is tyāga. Bhoga means try to enjoy for yourself. Tyāga means try to walk away from it and say, forget the whole thing. But then the path that resonates with the soul, and therefore it works, is bhakti rasa, which is do whatever you're doing and use whatever paraphernalia you have or are given in service to Krishna. And someone might say, what about me? What if I give everything to Krishna in Krishna's service, what am I left with? Well, here's what you're left with. Happiness, freedom from anxiety, a sense of unity with all living beings, and an ever-increasing love within your heart for the object, the most worthy object of love, which is Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said something, it's very practical, that one can live a life like this, and this International Society for Krishna Consciousness is meant to live in the bhakti rasa. And anybody can do it. Anybody can take it up without drastic changes in their life. Just a few small adjustments, and one can begin to taste bhakti rasa and feel happy. Om Tat Sat. Now, let's just see if you have any questions. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I want to ask a question. How to keeping on going in our bhakti rasa, even in distress and tribulations? How do we continue?
Make sure that you get enough rest, and make sure you're eating a good diet. Make sure to take a little time off during the year for yourself to go and think somewhere. Go to a forest or something like that and spend time with a notepad or maybe, a sketch pad and draw your emotions. You can ask Rukmini Chandrika about that. You need to have balance in your life. Birgapati Prabhu, Hare Krishna. There's sadhus that came in, and everyone should stand up. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpadrishcha kripasindhavevacha patitanam bhavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Give it to you. Okay. Hare Krishna. But the best way to keep on keeping on is to get good association. I was thinking about it this morning, and that is that all that we have and the way we think about life and the enthusiasm that we have comes from our association. And especially when you're dealing with a lot. When you're, let's say, engaged as much as you are. You're dealing with lots and lots of people, which always means, people have complexities in their life, true or false? When you deal with a few people, then you're dealing with a few complexities. When you deal with a lot of people, you deal with a lot of complexities. And as one of my dearest godbrothers once told me when I asked the same question, he said the main thing is you got to be blissful. Because when you're blissful, then you can handle anything. And we do know how to do that. We do know how to become blissful. So one way to become blissful is to have advanced association. Just makes you happy. And it transforms you right away. So try to get sadhusanga, pray for sadhusanga. If there's sadhusanga available somewhere, try to go there and get it. It's the most valuable thing you can get in life. And of course, we gravitate towards certain kinds of sadhus, and if you can surround yourself or make sure they're in your orbit or you're in their orbit, then it can sustain you. In fact, it's really a helpful practice to know your sadhus and make sure they know you. Even as early as, recently, as last night, dealing with all kinds of complexities, I called a sadhu. I was so tired too. I didn't even, it'd been a long day, but he was available. So I braced myself, got myself awake, and then I had a phone call and I realized he was 3 hours later than me anyway, way past his bedtime, but he was available. So I said, I'll make myself available, a godbrother of mine. And we talked. I kept saying, don't you want to take rest? And he said, no, I'm open to talk. And it solved a lot of my problems because I was able to just talk freely. This is called guyam akyati prichyati. There's a way in which when you have sadhu association, those you can talk to. Some may be in your upline, some may be in your sideline. Generally, you don't put your problems to your downline. They can't process it properly. The relationship isn't right for that, although sometimes you get free advice anyway. But that happens everywhere. But if you specifically pick out your support system and build it around you, that's the most helpful. And then whatever else I was saying is also very helpful. I would say that's the 80%. The other 20% is to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Because you have to have, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, yukta hara viharasya, yukta chestasya karmasu, yukta swapnavabodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. Yogis have to be balanced in their lives because we're really affected by the way our mind works and the way the body-mind connection is when it gets out of whack. That's a weird phrase. When you're out of balance, then there's a way that you can feel overwhelmed. Have you ever had that happen? You feel overwhelmed and then get a little rest, the sun comes up and you go like, all right, I think I can go on again. So that's helpful, to take care of yourself. Get enough sleep, not too much, not too little. Eat a good diet. That makes a huge difference in your consciousness. If you eat 90% refined carbohydrates or something like that, you might go crazy anyway. Maybe you can get away with it when you're young, but it's very difficult for the body and the mind to work properly if you give the wrong fuel. And then, of course, hear and chant properly. A lot of it comes back to our rounds. I had a godbrother who passed away. His name is Manasutta. He was a fantastic book distributor. He was the king of O'Hare Airport. And he would just attract people over. They couldn't resist him, and they'd buy books from him. And if you ever saw him chant japa, you know why. And people would actually come from different places to ask him, like, how are you doing this? He only had a one-word answer, ever. Japa. That's all he'd say. And when he'd sit for japa, no one should go near him if they knew what was good for him. Because he was ferocious about protecting his space when he was doing his japa. He didn't let anybody come there. And So, we can look to the advice I was given by an advanced God brother. He said, you got to be blissful to deal with all the circumstances that you need to when you're a leader in the Krishna consciousness movement. So how do you get blissful? Well, you got to chant good rounds. You got to get enough. You hear it. You have to hear Prabhupada's purports. Otherwise, I guarantee you'll go insane. If you don't read Prabhupada's books, you'll go insane. You could put that on my gravestone. And then get good association and live a balanced life. And that takes a lot of work. So you really got to work at all of that stuff. But it's worth it. It's like an Olympic athlete. You got to be like an Olympic athlete, getting yourself ready for chanting, getting yourself up early in the mornings, and be healthy. And really, you got the most amazing vehicle. There's descriptions of vehicles throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, like Shalva's thing. It was some fantastical creation. Kapila Dev had these mansions and stuff. The human body is the most amazing instrument we've been given. It's so powerful and so useful that we can realize God using this instrument. Just imagine if you had a racehorse. Anybody here have a racehorse before I bring this up? Let me just, say you had an extra 50 million lying around and you bought yourself a racehorse. You wouldn't feed him, Hostess Twinkies or something like that. You'd give him the best diet, put him in the best place, take care of him and stuff like that. So we have to take care of ourselves, body, mind, and spirit, in order to be up for the task. And also it's okay to get a little morose. Sometimes that's when we get our best realizations anyway. When you feel like you're knocked off your game and the whole world's against you and you're not worth anything, then sometimes you can dig deep. Remember Steve Jobs, he got kicked out of his own company? That's kind of even worse than getting fired, right? Getting fired from your own company. How does that happen? And then he said he was totally morose, and then he thought about it and said, why did I start the whole thing in the first place? He's like, I'll just go back to that. I'll start over. Just reinvent yourself and say, I'm going to start back for what made me blissful in the first place. Why did I come in here and start doing service? And get back to the basics. You always win with the basics. So that's how I just answered the question. Thank you very much. It's a very important question. Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So Maharaj, you were explaining about bhoga-tyāga and you mentioned that Krishna Bhakti Rasa is the ultimate destination. But in Mahaprabhu's instructions also, teachings also, especially in Jagannath Puri, we see there is a big aspect of vairagya, and which is also in English translated as renunciation. But to my understanding, this vairagya and tyaga, they cannot be same word. So can you please elaborate a little bit?
Well, actually, I was just reading a purport to Bhakti Parishanu Bhava Virakti Ananyata Traishatrika Ekakala, the one I just quoted a while ago, that says when you're feeling satisfaction from taking bhakti, then you feel full and you're not interested in material things. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta commented on that verse, and he said that when you're doing devotional service, then the renunciation comes naturally. And in relationship with Niskinchanasya Bhagavad Bhajano Mukasya Param Varam Jagamasur Bhavasagarasya, etc., that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu indicated what to speak of Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga. All verses that either Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quoted from the Bhagavatam or that he were written about what he was teaching include the idea of Vairagya. And I mean, in Vairagya, there's this sense of no longer being interested in the previous attachments you had. Whereas in Tyaga, there's a sense of militant renunciation, like separating yourself from them. And what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says about that is, if you get a little bhakti rasa, then it becomes quite natural to not be interested in things that are detrimental. Also, I mean, there is a way in which we'll die without sense gratification. Sense gratification is like salt. You can't have too much, you can't have too little. It's like cutting your fingernails. You can't leave them long, and if you cut them too short, you really suffer, right? So there's a balance in it, in sense gratification. And Krishna recommends that we find what our qualifications are, and we live according to them. Prabhupada very kindly adjusted our practice of devotional service to 16 rounds and then serve all day long. Do service and hear and chant. And he gave very simple ways of being insulated from the really pernicious parts of the material world, which have to do with misusing the organs of generation for all kinds of other things, for eating things that are not offerable to Krishna, intoxication, by which you lose your ability to see your own superpowers. You depend on another power instead, and then you lose the subtlety of appreciating how Krishna is empowering you, and then you lose your confidence in life, and then you have to depend on something else outside of your own relationship with Krishna. And then gambling can become addictive, and also a way that one loses one's sense of honesty. You try to get something for nothing. So those are just very commonsensical, although not nowadays so much for people in general, but they're insulate us from that. That's a very, easy form of renunciation. Also, we keep in mind that when talking about, for instance, Raghunath Das Goswami, he came from a billionaire family. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used his disciples to show the world the power of bhakti. So what better way to do it than have a billionaire come who came from the best house and had as much money as he wanted. And then he became so disenchanted with all of it and enchanted with Krishna that he was able to give it all up. But it's never been the mode that Srila Prabhupada taught, or Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, that we should all eat food that was discarded by the cows. Even they won't eat it. Like, that's my meal. And things like that. Even in talking about Dhruva Maharaj, Prabhupada mentions that we're not to imitate, we can follow in the footsteps. Which means do what you can to keep the body and soul together in a healthy way. In fact, Prabhupada, when you go through all Prabhupada's books, which I know you have, you can come to the conclusion very easily that Prabhupada, let me phrase it another way because it sounds like, Prabhupada has, as our other acharyas, put the highest premium of practice on teaching Krishna consciousness to others. And when one's preoccupied with giving Krishna consciousness to others, then one can advance quickly in devotional service and also get a special taste. And he emphasized that as the best way to serve Krishna, is to think about how to do good for others. It's a higher level of devotional service. And in that, whatever it takes to do that and manage that, that's real austerity, the way Prabhupada put it. That's our real austerity. He wasn't so impressed with people who would take off by themselves, as I brought up yesterday or the day before, and just sit by themselves and chant Hare Krishna all day long. Neither did Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, as we know well. But both were impressed with those who had the wherewithal to somehow or other give themselves to others in order to help them become Krishna conscious. And when you do that, that's an austerity. In fact, when devotees first started going out on traveling Sankirtan, started here in San Francisco, you know that, right? First traveling Sankirtan party. Yeah, Keshava he bought a kind of bus and then fixed it up, and then they went out traveling. But there was a problem because devotees had always lived inside the temple, And then what are you going to eat? Isn't that one of the biggest things when you go traveling? It's like, now what are we going to eat? Who's going to feed us? So they had to go buy stuff. And then, all we knew is you go in the temple, the prasadam comes out, and you eat. In fact, I was thinking about that at Govardhan a few years ago, because we're so engaged in doing the hearing and chanting, and then they call us for lunch. They ring a bell and we go out there. It's a very joyful time. But I was sitting there one day and I said, I don't even know where the kitchen is. I don't know who the cooks are. And I realized that you might not know where it's all coming from. So anyway, on the traveling Sankirtan, they were doing the best they could to buy things and offer them in whatever way they could. They didn't know how to do that. And there was a big controversy about it, because some people said, well, you're doomed. You're away from the temple, you're not eating Mahaprasadam, so you're definitely going to go to hell. And then, of course, there was another side, because there's always another side to everything, right? Especially in this age. And to solve the controversy, as usual, they went to Prabhupada, who was in LA. And two of my godbrothers, Bhutatma and Keshava, both of whom I talked to about this personally, said they went down to ask Prabhupada specifically about this. And when Prabhupada asked them some questions about it, he said, oh, so you're doing this for traveling Sankirtan? And he made the signs like kartals. And then he said, no, you can eat, whatever you can get. Actually, I sort of modified what he said. I'm not going to say it on the microphone. But he indicated that it wasn't a problem because they were out preaching. And he got that from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who on an Ekadashi day gave one of his preachers who needed to go out and do a program, a Mahaprasadam that included grains. And to emphasize that the most important austerity that one can do is to go and teach Krishna consciousness. That's definitely Prabhupada's mood and the way he taught about austerity. If you're not doing that, then it's important because to stay home and chant, because otherwise you might just scroll the internet or do any other thing. So that comes up in a conversation when Tamal Krishna Maharaj is asking Prabhupada about whether we should all chant 25 rounds on Ekadashi or more. And Prabhupada said, oh yes. And then he said, so 64 rounds, Prabhupada said, oh yes, you should, every Ekadashi. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, so then instead of going out for preaching, then we should do that. Prabhupada said, oh no. He said, these are for those who are not preaching. You should chant, extra rounds and do these other types of austerities. And then he said, for the preacher, there's no rule. Then he said, but don't take it. Because what a thing to say in an open forum during a Sunday feast, but the fact is that, this is the mood of austerity that comes from our acharyas. The method of worshiping Krishna, that which you take trouble upon yourself and rearrange your life and your mind so you can take care of other people, is a big, big austerity, and it's the best way of worshiping Krishna within the heart. Tapyante lokatapena sarva prayasojana parama aradanam taddi purushasya akilatmana. This is what this is what Shukadeva Goswami says about the matter when he observed Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva drank an ocean of poison? Say yes. We'll come to your house afterwards to see if you opened up the 8th canto or not. So if it makes a cracking sound when we open it, we know you might have been lying. So he, to save the universe, drank an ocean of poison, and Shukadeva said, see, this is what the advanced devotees, parama aradanam, means the highest service you can do is try to save others. And of course, we have to save ourselves first. Otherwise, as Satyadev Prabhu, my old friend and buddy, when he took up the profession of a paramedic, at the first day they taught him, what did they teach him? A dead paramedic can't save anyone. So you got to make sure that you don't get dead. Okay, any more questions? Jai Kanai, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you very much for a very enlightening class and topic. And we being grihasthas are kind of dealing with this on hand, so forgive my kind of a diversion from the topic. But modern education is teaching a lot of self-sufficiency to the kids these days. And they are basically in a place where they can foresee that the results of the traditional fellowship, grow up in a traditional home, get married at a certain age, and then follow suit if you are not pursuing a higher goal. But if they know the consequence right now, they are seeing that, okay, our forefathers or our current parents have done this, and the results they see are not basically, they are not able to take that. So the result they are getting to is that, okay, one should not pursue this married life, if you will, because you asked that, okay, what is the point of having kids? But if you are being asked that question, then what we can answer as a guidance to them, because obviously they are not able to take up the path of self-realization or bhakti yoga, if you will. But they are reaching a result where they are not able to then take up what is the natural process, that, okay, if you are not doing this, then you take up the natural yajna process where you get married and do a grihastha life. And seeing the consequences, they don't want to go towards that.
I got it.
And
so first you have to define terms. What is it that the previous, what their predecessors did? You said that they will be able to follow this, but what is this? What did they actually do? There's a way in which in every culture there's some sense of cultural momentum. There are social roles that people have to follow according to the culture. It comes with being born into any family. You have a sense that you're following and you're fitting in. Humans have to fit in somewhere. Social psychology talks about how, we have certain psychological needs to fit in. And when you're a child, then you look at your family and you say, what do they do? And what's my place in the family? How do I fit in? What's my role here? And then you try to fit in to the role, and you have different roles at different times. And then, of course, you look at your parents, and at a certain time, there's a way in which children, when they're growing up and they become adolescents, they have a sense of freedom, where they look and they see, well, I am my own person, so what is my obligation? And it's not like you can just tell them as parents, like, this is what you have to do now, and they'll say, why? And you better be ready to answer that question, why? Because it's not good enough to just say, because we did it. And like, did what? Like, how did it work out for you? And therefore, a life, a spiritual family life has to be, for in my opinion, for children to grow up, there have to be good examples, and there actually has to be substantive reasons for why everyone's doing what they're doing. That goes for not just children, for anybody practicing any system. If it doesn't make sense, then ultimately people aren't going to follow it. Has to be not only well-reasoned faith, but people actually have to be able to participate in it. So when young people have strong support system and they are able to grow up and have a sense that there is something valuable here, and they see it in their parents and other peers or in other elders, and then also they see it in their peers as well. And there's a support system, a tight-knit community, for instance, might do that has high values. then when it comes to time when they say, okay, I'm going to make my own mind up, then it's a very high probability that they'll go for those things where they have a sense that this actually not only is reasonable, but it's worked for everybody around me and other people are taking part in it. I asked a group of kids during the pandemic, I know you guys have heard this a million times, but I convened a Zoom meeting with as many as my God brothers and God sisters I could who had been initiated into Krishna consciousness when they were young. That means as young as 12. Prabhupada gave initiation to some that were 12, 14, and so forth. And I asked them, so what's up? How'd this happen? And how was it for you? And I asked them, what were the factors that were most helpful for you? Consensus. Seeing peers doing great. And I said, were there any factors that didn't help? And in their context, they said, not having upward mobility, meaning they didn't see any spots for them in the Krishna consciousness movement where they could actually have a career or leadership position or do more ever-increasing service and so forth. I point these things out because there is a science to it to a certain degree, and on the other hand, there's a way in which every living entity ultimately does what every living entity wants. And that part is up to the living entity. Thanks, everybody, for coming today. We're going to have a little kirtan, if you don't mind. Anybody mind? Oh, Bhakti Divya, go ahead. I'll give my answer in 60 seconds or less, or your money back from today's class.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. If we are stuck in a material situation where we have to fight a battle that we can't win, and we still have to fight it, and
wait a sec, I can't hear you. We can hear you're audible, but it's a little muffled. Go ahead and say it again a little slower, and I'll listen more carefully.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. If we are stuck in a situation where we have to fight a battle that we cannot win, but we still have to fight it, and then we have to deal with this hopelessness. That why do I have to, do this? What's the point? And the feeling of how do you deal with that feeling of hopelessness?
Yeah, if you get overwhelmed by your situation and you feel hopeless, what should you do? Is that what she's asking? Yeah, hopelessness it's a hard emotion to deal with. We can feel overwhelmed and you can feel like, did you ever feel like everything is broken? I won't sing the song again. I gave a lyric the other day. But I've had that happen. I'm sure everyone else has. And, the world, we can feel like we're under an onslaught, and it is a very difficult situation to deal with. It's good to have someone to go to vent to. That's one thing. It's good to have somebody that you can just go and tell your problems to, that can listen to you. Because, we're really all in the same boat. I hate cliches, but I love cliches. I'm writing a book called Idiom Savant. And the cliche that we're all in the same boat is really true. One time or another, we're all overwhelmed. If we really stopped and think about kind of the situation we're in, we would get... It's like Frank, what was his name? Who wrote about the cockroach, man who was born as a cockroach? Kafka. I was going to say the prasadam, comfortables. Kafka. Franz Kafka. Yeah, he wrote a story about a person who was born as maybe a centipede or something, or he was on his back trying to figure it out. There's so many things going on for us, and it can feel overwhelming. So it's good to have spiritual community and friends. Have a lifeline, somebody you can call. I have lots of friends. I know which kind of things I can dump on them. Like, okay, this is how I feel. I'm going to call this one now. Call him, like, no problem. And then I feel better. You got to know too that everyone's going through similar things at one time or another. You're not alone, and it's helpful to just have people you can tell the details to. Because a lot of times when you hear yourself speaking about it, then you start to get more intelligence on how to work it out as well. So that's really helpful. And then all the other things we talked about too. But you're not alone. Everyone's going through some kind of trauma, and if they're not now, they will later. And best to just deal with it one day at a time and try to stay absorbed in the moment. And remember Krishna. Remember Krishna. It's actually the only solution to our existential crisis is to remember how Krishna is controlling everything. I told this story a million times too, but I was involved in a business and something went really awry and it very much disturbed me. So I called a devotee friend and he said, "You're not the Supreme Ishvara." And I immediately felt better. Just like, yeah, right, I'm not the Supreme Controller. What am I going to do about it? And another time it happened when I was managing a project and another godbrother sent me a verse that was with Prithu Maharaj. He'd become so fed up with Lord Indra, he wanted to kill him. And he was so disturbed. And then finally Brahma came and said, it's going to be okay, because that's the way things are here in the material world. And just hearing that verse, I was like, yeah, I think I can go on another day. Just try to live the fight another day. Yeah, it's hard, but take it one day at a time. Call a friend. Yeah, Pavani Bhakti's saying she'll talk to you. Thank you, Bhakti and Divya. It's good to see you, and we definitely feel your pain. It's really hard. Life, we can adjust our expectations. If we expect easy street, when life looks like easy street, there's danger at your door. That's for Raghava back in Alachua. Okay, now we're going to chant a little Hare Krishna, because that really can help out a lot. Right? Yeah, why not try? Thanks, everybody. You sound great. Fantastic. It's amazing, too. It's like a miracle. Krishna gave us these little voice boxes. We can just sing songs, and it feels good, right? Yeah, you can feel good all the time. Just keep chanting. So now we're going to escalate. You ready to escalate? I'm not convinced at all you're ready. All right, then. We're going to do a Hare Krishna dance party. We got this temple specially for the floor. All the other parts we didn't even look at. We just said the floor, we'll buy it. So it's a wood floor. It's old growth wood that was reclaimed, and we built this whole floor was placed in here just for dancing. So you can sway. There's some of you already know the Swami step. You can follow somebody next to you, but I recommend never miss a chance to dance. If you can dance before the deity and sing, then all your problems will be solved. How's that sound? All right. So now we're going to do a practical exercise to get ready. We'll roll up this beautiful carpet. We'll put away all the asanas in that nice box that the devotees made. Who are the devotees that made that? Huh? Tarang? Tarun made that? Tarang. There's Tarang. Tarang's a genius. So thanks, Tarang, for making that box. You can put all the seats in there, right? No, in there. Anyway, wherever they go. He made both of those. And then we're all going to stand up. The ladies can be on this side. Gentlemen can be on that side. Just freedom of movement. And then we'll sing Hare Krishna and dance to our heart's content. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Let's get it ready.